Hello and welcome to the AI Show brought to you by Lenovo. I'm your host, Emily Barrett, and I'm thrilled to be your guide in this fascinating world of artificial intelligence. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the AI universe, exploring the latest innovations, the people behind them, and how these technologies are shaping our future. On this episode, we'll be joined by Guy Murphy, who I'll be discussing advertising for small businesses with. So let's begin as we take you on our journey through the world of AI. So Guy, do you want to just start off by introducing yourself and a little bit about what you do as well?
Sure, thank you, Emily. So I'm the co-founder of an ad tech company in the UK, a startup called OSSA, which stands for Online Self-Service Advertising. Tell you more about that later.
Yeah.
But most of my career has actually been as an employee in big advertising agencies. So I was Global Chief Strategy Officer for J. Walter Thompson, big international agency, and Deputy Chairman of BBH, one of the biggest creative agencies. So my career has mainly been in the kind of corporate world of advertising. So it's been a big shift for me to go from that role to startup. And the pivot, I think, was around COVID, as it has been for many people, where it was an opportunity to sort of take stock and realize what the industry I was in couldn't do, which you never get the space and time to think about. You always think about what it can do. And it kind of raised this big idea of advertising agencies just cannot get to small businesses. And so I spent, I think, probably 2 years speaking at least once a week on Zoom with my fellow co-founder called Fadi Kata. And it was one of those rare occasions where we had so much time and space to talk and think about what's possible in that kind of COVID lockdown period. And we had lots of suggestions and ideas what to do. I think at one point we wanted to try and sell advertising on Amazon, which we couldn't get them to understand or do. Wanted to use advertising as a product, not a service, and sell it on Amazon. Various ideas, and then we ended up circling back to what we're doing now. So we're a small outfit. We're in Shoreditch like everybody else. And I'm thoroughly enjoying having taken the risk and learning so much more now. And I'm probably able to be in the world of AI so much more than I ever would have been in agencies. And the thrill and excitement of that it's been worth it on its own.
I think it's really interesting to hear how you've had that big corporate view of things, and during COVID you had that time period where you were able to reflect on what your industry could do differently, and as a result of that move into something not completely different but a little bit different. So do you want to explain a little bit around how OSSA is different and what it is you do to enable small businesses?
Sure. So first of all, it's worth pointing out, because it's relatively unknown, what a big economy small businesses represent. So about 97% of all businesses are small. So they have a small number of employees, or they're sole traders and entrepreneurs. And they represent about 50 to 60% of GDP of a country. So it's a huge amount of revenue.
Yeah.
And in contrast to advertising agencies, who are only interested in the big 50% for big companies, we're focused on those smaller companies. It's an awful lot to go for. And what you quickly discover is the small companies' confidence and skills around advertising are very low, because they're essentially doing the job they're doing. You know, they're running their cafe, or they're running their coffee shop, or whatever it might be. And marketing is an unknown phenomenon for them.
Yeah.
And so they're kind of stuck thinking, I need to do advertising to build my business. I know that. But increasingly, the world of digital advertising is getting more and more complicated. I go onto these ad manager platforms on Meta, and I don't understand the first question.
Yeah.
I think the first question is, what is your marketing objective? And they're stuck. So they leave. Advertising agencies don't want to help them. Using freelancers is an expensive option. So they're sort of stuck. So we've tried to create the simplest possible way for someone who knows almost nothing about digital advertising to create, publish, and see the analytics of advertising for their business. So we've done an awful lot of research to find out where is the knowledge level for these small businesses, and what is their tolerance for being questioned about what they need. Okay. And we've tried to ask the question, what's the smallest number of questions you could ask someone in order to create advertising for them that works? Whereas normally you in advertising, you have a big brief of lots of questions and you want to have all the angles covered and lots of background. We're doing the opposite. What's the least amount of effort from the user you can possibly get? And we've got it down to about 2 questions.
That's an extraordinarily low number of questions.
It is. Naught would probably be too little.
Yeah.
But two's too small indeed. And the way we've managed to do that is to use our knowledge of advertising to answer lots of questions for them, so we don't need to ask them. Then using automation to be able to hook things up and proceed along the process without them needing to be involved, and using AI to do a lot of the creation and the decision making for them so they don't need to. So all that's going on behind the scenes, but as far as the user's concerned, it's super simple, short, very, very easy. So it's a self-serve platform. Everyone should be able to go in, create advertising for their business, publish it on social media platforms. And we've removed the need for people. And we've got about 25 customers. We only launched a couple of weeks ago. Some of them are recurring. So we're very excited about what this can do for them.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly sounds like a really interesting idea and a completely different way coming at this, right? Trying to make advertising available to the masses, which it wouldn't typically have been. How would you say AI has changed your ability to do that in terms of, I know you mentioned that you're using it within that workflow. If you didn't have that AI piece there, what would that look like instead? And would you be able to do what you do?
Yeah, so the AI has allowed us to, the core of it is to be able to create the advertising creative itself.
Okay.
Without that, you'd have to ask the user to do the work, to choose pictures, to create layouts, to do basically an editing job on this. You'd be asking the user to have an understanding of advertising psychology, which they don't have, and be able to obviously write much better lines and copy than anyone could do if they didn't know about it. And so to the user, it all looks very simple and in a way underappreciate what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But the core of it, in a way, is to be able to get AI to understand what's the business that this client, this user is, what category are they in, how can it be writing headlines that will particularly promote that category, because it's not the same for every category. You use different nudges and different prompts to be able to get the right kind of lines. Find out what kind of imagery is right for that category, because it's very different if you're choosing imagery for a florist than if you're choosing it for a funeral parlor, for example. And then to be able to read those images and understand the focal points in them. So where can you and can't you put copy, so it's not over people's faces or over something important in the ad. To understand the contrast on those images. So what can you put where and how will it be visible? And all of those will be very complicated decisions that people otherwise be having to make for themselves. And so AI has removed all that hard work. And so, we're finding that, people who've never done this So a plumber or a one-man band solicitor's outfit are suddenly playing with advertising and thinking this is the greatest thing. We've now created this sort of fun advertising engine. They need to know nothing more than where to click once or twice, and it's a real joy for them.
And that just to me sounds like, if you didn't have the AI capability there, you'd have to have a team of experts doing that work for people, right? Which is then going to escalate the cost of being able to produce that. But that also leads us into this question of, well, how do you see AI and the advertising job market going forwards? Because obviously you are using AI to do a lot of the creative work for you. And traditionally that would have and is done by people, right?
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a moral and sociological dilemma there in terms of how, if this were to be rolled out on a massive scale, how does that then impact society as a whole? So it'd be really interesting to hear your views on that, and particularly with respect to how small businesses are able to engage in advertising. Because I get the feeling that, I'm not a small business expert, right? But without AI, it sounds like maybe the cost overhead would be too much for these businesses to be able to utilize your service, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So just
no, it's a great question, and people don't really want to talk about that subject, and all the conversation from the advertising industry is that there won't be any kind of casualties because of this. But we all know that a lot of the jobs that were done by people are now going to be capable of being done by AI and so on. So there's going to be some natural shift that's going to go on. I think I would say it's going to take a while, because advertising agencies are going to take a long time to create new business models and reinvent themselves to make this possible, because they have a huge amount of kind of legacy stuff to deal with, not least all the people. So I think there is a little bit of comfort in the fact that there's time to know and work out what can be done. I think if this was to happen overnight, then I think it would be bloodshed. Yeah. But so I think it's going to take a long while. I think agencies will, the evolution of this, I think agencies will first put in AI at a layer of sort of operations. So they'll just kind of try and make processes more efficient or back office more efficient and some of those things. Save a bit of money and save a bit of time. Then I think they'll start to put it into the product. So how can it start to be a tool for creative people? But the top layer is the business reinvention. How will they actually create a business where AI is truly at the heart of it? And it's the top layer, which is the layer that is the real threat to the natural staffing in the advertising industry. But I think it'll take them a while. So it is a risk. There are definitely going to be a shift in what people are going to be doing. But I think there's time to understand the landscape, so this doesn't feel quite as threatening as it is.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it absolutely isn't going to happen overnight, right?
No.
And I think it isn't. Obviously, it's not just advertising that's dealing with this dilemma in terms of how you reskill staff and redeploy job roles. And as you say, it's going to take time to build up. But the other thing that I'm interested to get your view on is how that model then impacts the skills pipeline in the future. Because obviously, if you're not bringing in people to create those creatives, what does a career progression almost look like? How do you get people who are able to become experts in advertising if they've not actually done any of the creating of adverts, as it were?
Yes. I mean, it's a fascinating question of what will be the jobs that are advertising in future versus the jobs that were advertising as it has been in the past. And I don't think it's a case that, you know, one of the particular jobs that exist now will dominate. So, for example, the creative director of now, I don't think will automatically become the creative director of the AI in future, or the strategy leader now will become the key person. I don't think it'll be like that, because the kind of skills that are needed to drive AI advertising are slightly unknown. I mean, should there be a technical person who understands how the model was trained and built? Should they be a crafts person that understands exactly what's needed on the lighting in on this particular shot that the Gen AI is creating? Is it a strategic person who's making judgments of whether this is going to sell or not for what the client needs? Or is it a creative guru who is deciding this is marvelously disruptive, impactful work? Is it those? I mean, could you ever get all of those into one person? I doubt it.
Yeah.
I mean, what's called prompt engineering now will have to evolve into I don't know what in future.
Yeah.
But that shape is unclear. So in terms of skills path and career journeys, I think everybody in advertising now has to think there's a major disruption going to happen to their department. And of course, everybody is now trying to reskill and become fluent in this and just gain enough experience to know. But it's going to be unimaginable, I think, the dominant roles in advertising in future to now. All people will know is it won't be what they're doing for now, for sure.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of where AI models are today, and obviously using them to create those creatives and work out where to put copy, and how to do layouts and all of that, is it one expert system you're using for that, or are you using multiple different systems?
So we use OpenAI ChatGPT. I think we're on 4 Turbo now.
Okay.
Which is working well for us. I think one of the dilemmas is there are so many models now, and there are so many different upgrades and variants that come out so frequently. How do you know what's the right model you should be using? And so we compare and contrast what's going on with new models and so on. But already you can feel there's a certain inertia once you get to use a model and it's working well, and ChatGPT seems to be the sort of default option that's performing as well as any at the moment. It's hard to shift, but we have to be ready because anything could happen. You know, we've seen recently quite a lot of controversy around some of the companies and what they're offering with Gemini and OpenAI last year and so on. So we have to be ready. There are issues of privacy, of course, and data security, and the extent to which these models can be used for nefarious means. And there will be more issues that will come up. So we have to be open-minded about this. But we are on that for now.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess so. My next question is going to be around that privacy and data security piece, right? Because I think a lot of people, when I've been speaking to them about ChatGPT, don't realise the capability of it to then retrain on anything you are giving to it, right? Especially public version. Yeah. So there's a level of caution that people do need to have when they're going out and using these tools. Don't get me wrong, they are great tools, but if you Google for data breaches that have been conducted by ChatGPT, you will find them.
Yes.
So there are elements around not feeding confidential data into it, right?
Yes.
So how do you make sure that your clients in particular are aware of what they should and shouldn't be feeding into this process?
I mean, in a way, we're fortunate because the people we're talking to are small businesses. And what we ask of them, as I've mentioned, is pretty limited. So we're not asking actually for any confidential data at all. We don't know what their sales data is, for example. We don't have any customer data from them. So, and we've deliberately designed it so this process can feel very safe. And frankly, asking small business people to be uploading target email lists is not something that they were particularly comfortable or know how to do anyway. So I think we're quite fortunate. But you're right. When I think of some of the clients I used to deal with in kind of corporate advertising world, I mean, a P&G or a Unilever are going to be extremely sensitive about what models are going to be used, and open source won't be acceptable, and people are going to want some pretty strong safeguards from the advertising agencies about what they can protect. And I think that's especially true because agencies are going to be creating brand-specific AI models. So they will train a model to be excellent at producing output for one brand. So if it was the car market, a BMW Gen AI model, or a Mercedes one, or an Audi one. And so that model will contain a huge amount of very important information about the brand, its strategy, what's needed to be able to build their business, customer data. And so the risk around those is very high. We're not in that space, but I can see that's going to be very big issues for those bigger companies.
Yeah, and I guess for those bigger companies, it does make it slightly more of a barrier to adoption, right? Whereas if you are able to do things more flexibly and reactively, it gives you that ability to serve the small businesses that you are looking after, right? Because you can act more flexibly because you're not asking them for that data.
Absolutely, and relatedly, I remember there was quite a standoff between agencies and big clients where they were discussing who's responsible for the copyright issues around Gen AI, which is a big, difficult subject. So is it the agency because they created the images on their models, or is it the model creators, or is it the client because it's on behalf of the client? I think that was a strong barrier and still is a bit of a barrier for adoption in that world, and it isn't clear, is it?
No, and I think there's all sorts of legal work that's going on around who owns what when it's outputted from a open source AI engine, and also how you declare whether it's been created using generative AI or hasn't been, especially with the new EU AI Act that's coming. Obviously, we don't know how that's going to apply here in the UK, but will come in across the rest of the EU, which does state that you've got to now state if something has been created by generative AI, so that people can differentiate. Because let's face it, it is incredibly hard now to differentiate whether something's been created by a creator, a person,
for sure,
versus generative AI, right? So I think there's a lot still to work out in terms of the legal ramifications of utilizing generative AI within creative industries as a whole. Obviously, advertising falls into that. So I guess from my perspective and from this conversation that we've had today, what I'm really hearing from you is that small businesses really have an advantage here in terms of being able to utilize these tools in ways that maybe large businesses can't currently, because with a small business, you are much more limited in terms of corporate guidelines, etc., around that brand, right? So if you wanted to give like one message out to small businesses at the moment around using AI for their advertising, what would that message be?
Well, firstly, that very well observed that small businesses have a degree of freedom and liberation around these services rather than caution and lawyers, which appear to be everywhere else. And I think that plays to the point of AI is a fantastic kind of democratizer of marketing services, advertising, and it's allowing small businesses to be able to upskill in a way they'd never imagined. And I guess, if there was a message, it would be, you can. The sense of empowerment that's possible, that was never there before, and to be able to start to close the gap between yourselves and what you thought were previously completely unreachable standards of marketing, and to start not necessarily to compete, but to be in the same ballpark as much bigger companies who were previously denied, the smaller companies previously denied any production values or production budgets at all, or being able to get a voiceover for a radio commercial or any of those basic things. That's not all at the fingertips. And so there's a phrase we use at OSSA around Gen AI is able to definitely raise the floor of what's possible without necessarily yet raising the ceiling. But raising the floor for small businesses is fantastic, because being able to go from almost nothing to something is a fantastic contribution. From being a business that was relying on organic posting on Instagram and a website, maybe a couple of Google AdWords, to be able to now put out a campaign for themselves, created in minutes at very low cost, in a geography that's right for them. So it plays out in their region. If they're a hairdresser in Fulham, it could be advertised in Fulham. I mean, this is enormous. So the gains are huge. The effort is small. Get involved.
Just try it. Right?
Get into it, and to not think that it's like how it was when you're confronted, as I mentioned, with those ad manager platforms. It's not like that, or it doesn't have to be like that, or it isn't like that with OSSA anyway.
Okay. I think that's really reassuring to hear, because when you look at the ad manager platforms, as you say, they're full of questions and they are complicated.
Yeah.
So hearing that you guys at OSSA have got a great solution to reduce that complexity, lower barrier to entry, and create something that's actually going to be really useful for small businesses to be able to grow their client base, grow their audience, grow their engagement is huge. So I hope we see great things from you guys in the future.
Wow.
I'm really sure we will. So thank you very much for your time today, Guy. It's been an absolutely fascinating conversation.
Thank you. It's whistled by. Thank you for all your questions.
No, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll see you for the next episode.